Now let's turn our attention to the higher consciousness, which is the top of the Maypole, and ask the higher consciousness to send us through our ribbons relaxing energy to help us relax. So we'll do this by breathing in the energies and breathing out any blockages here. So just imagine you're breathing in from the higher consciousness, relaxing energy, and it's just permeating through you. And you're breathing out any anxiety, any troubles of the day, any tensions, anything that's playing on your mind. We'll do this a few times by breathing in the energy. Breathing out the anxiety. Breathe out anything that's stopping you from receiving the energies. Just one more time. Now let's collectively turn our attention to the high C once again by keeping the visual strong, and ask the high C to send us healing energy. And once again, let's use the ribbon to harness the healing energy from the high C. Just breathe it in. This can be used to heal any physical ailments that you may be feeling. Again, breathe out any blockage, negative feelings, anxiety, doubt, and just let the energies flow. This can also be a great time to heal from any emotional, mental scarring. Anything that comes to you specifically by breathing in the healing energy, breathing out. If nothing specific comes to mind, you can just let the energies flow in the high C, which is all-knowing, will take care of healing what it needs to heal. Often we can't remember. Because many scars are buried very deep within. Just a couple of more breaths. As we turn our attention to the higher consciousness once again, let's ask for the high C, as it's called, to send us cleansing energy through our ribbon. And if it helps, you can feel this as a great gush of cool water under a waterfall, or just like a internal river flowing through you and just clearing so much of the past that we carry. Just ask to be cleansed of any pain that people may have caused us by breathing in, breathing out. Any pain that we may have caused people knowingly or unknowingly. Breathing in, breathing out. As you breathe out, you can feel free to be quite emphatic and just let it leave any part of your body. Just let go of the past. And so much baggage that we carry, cleansing us of any harmful or negative programming, through things that we may have thought at some point in time, seen, done. Again, specific or general, both are fine. Just a couple of more breaths. As we turn to the higher consciousness yet once again, let's ask for rejuvenating energy. This is kind of akin to charging our batteries. Because in this day and age of over information, over communication, social media, so much quote unquote noise, it's very depleting. And this is a great opportunity just to imagine the higher consciousness sending you through your ribbon energy that's just charging your internal battery to the fullest. Taking a few breaths in and breathing out. As we turn our attention to our higher consciousness once again, now that we've created this wonderful foundation, we can ask the higher consciousness to send us this wonderful gift, which is our birthright of pure unconditional love. If it helps, you can imagine it as a bright red pink energy coming through your ribbon and starting to permeate your entire being. So just imagine it flowing gently from your head through all your sense organs, your brain, your ears, nose, mouth. Just imagine it filling you gently. Your neck, arms, hands, shoulders, chest, back, all your internal organs, your lungs, your digestive system, reproductive system, legs, calves, feet. And just take a moment to be completely absorbed in this wonderful energy of unconditional love. And now that we have filled ourselves with this wonderful energy from the higher consciousness, it becomes our duty to share it. Otherwise, like anything that we don't share and we hoard, it just gets stuck and stagnates and can even be harmful. So let us just fold our palms like a namaste and ask the higher consciousness to show us people, individual people with whom we can let this energy flow. Just be an instrument and you're filled with it, and just let it flow out of your palms as you're pointing your namaste to these people. And just 2 or 3 seconds at each person. And remember to ask the high C to include people with whom you're having a very difficult time. It may be colleagues at work, it may be a neighbor, it may be anyone that one is having problems with. And just 2 or 3 seconds per person, whoever comes intuitively to your mind. We don't really have to worry about whether it reaches the people or not. It's our job just to share it, and it goes where it's meant to go. And once again, as we fill ourselves with this unconditional love, just ask the higher consciousness to show you groups of people with whom you can share this love. These could be a group of colleagues, your society members, groups in a religious organization, uh, any place where it's more than one person, hospitals, orphanages, prisons, and just take a moment to see what comes to your mind's eye, and just as an instrument, let it flow through you and to these groups. And as we turn to the high C, let's ask for places on the planet where we can send this energy collectively, countries, regions, where we know there is strife, war, famine, and suffering, and where this unconditional love is lacking, whatever you may have seen on the news. And collectively, let's harness this beautiful energy and send it to each of these places. Please remember to include the leaders of such countries, because it is only love ultimately that changes things, and not the criticism and hate which we are so accustomed to seeing and sometimes even being a part of. Do not underestimate the power that this collective focus and prayer has. And you can also send this anywhere else, to nature in general, animals. And one last time, as we focus on the higher consciousness, let's remember to also impart this love, which is very much our true nature, but harness it for ourselves as well. So if you're comfortable, just give yourselves a light hug and say 3 times together, I love me. And the first time softly, and building it up to a crescendo, if you're comfortable doing so. So, I love me. I love me. I love me. And with that, whenever you feel ready, just can rub your palms together gently and cup your eyes and slowly open your eyes and come back to your present place on this August 29th evening, Saturday, at this wonderful Lost Key session organized by all of you, 5:34 p.m. Thank you. It's wonderful to have all of you participating in the Maypole exercise, which is one of the main visualizations in the Cutting the Ties That Bind. Phyllis Krystal method for us to all be able to connect to our higher consciousness and harness these wonderful energies. You can use this method at any time. So you can just imagine this session that we did just now, and that there were 31 or 30 odd people in a session, and they were in a place, and there was a maypole, and you can just use that session to connect anytime, even on your own, to do this meditation whenever you like. So I think what might be a good idea is to share now a little bit about the theory and the thesis of this work, and to share a little bit more. This session will at best be an introductory session, because the work is quite deep, though it's very simple to do. It works at many levels and has a lot of depth. So we'll cover as much ground as feels right, so that it sinks in, rather than sort of trying to cover too much ground and not getting anywhere. So let's talk a little bit about uh, what I like to call the 4 pillars of this work, which is a terminology that I myself have coined after having practiced the work for a while, just to make it a little easy to explain what the work is about. So the first one I like to call the 3 S's. So that is simple symbols for the subconscious. So that is one way of, an easy way of remembering the first pillar of this work. Simple symbols for the subconscious mind, or the subconscious, which is sort of, it's understood that that is really the mind. And the reason that symbols are used is that the subconscious mind, which is a part of us, a big part of us. In fact, if you see the famous photograph on the subconscious mind, you see an iceberg, and you see this in many posts that you see. Uh, and it shows about 75% of the iceberg is under the water, you can't see it. And the 25% is above the water. So the subconscious mind is a much larger part of our being. And it is the part that sort of registers everything, every thought, word, deed that we have done and we carry, and all our programming sits over there. So very often we are trying to make a shift or a change within ourselves for anything. It could be a habit, it could be conditioning, early conditioning, programming that is not helpful to us, and we find it very difficult to make that change, no matter how much we want. I mean, there are 2 stages to it. One stage is that uh, some of us may not even be ready to make that change, or don't even want to make that change. So we won't even be looking for the answers. That's the early stage. Why change in this particular thing? I feel there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with that. That's everybody's personal choice. But the next phase, which we all feel in some department or the other, is that no, I need to change this. It's getting in the way. I'm not moving forward in my business or in my personal relationships because of this particular pattern or habit that keeps reappearing itself, or these things that keep happening. You you keep finding that it's the patterns are karmic, and they keep happening, and you keep saying, why is it every time that I have a problem with partnerships, or why is it every time that I have, it's the same problem, and you almost like can see it coming, and you almost see yourself walking into the same problem. And a lot of that, when it becomes very upsetting, you really want to change it, but even then it becomes very difficult to change, because the subconscious mind has not been impressed. We are impressing things through the conscious mind. I want to give up smoking. I must try. I must do it. I will do it. I must do it. Just can't do it. Or I must have one less drink a day, or whatever it might be, or anything that this thing. But as I said, there may be a stage where you don't want to do it, but there's a stage where you will want to do something in some department. And unless the subconscious mind is impressed, it is almost impossible to make that shift. Sometimes it happens, but it's also because the subconscious mind is impressed in some way or the other. Now, the subconscious mind is very intelligent, but it's very it's also very childlike, not childish, but childlike, which means that it does not understand the language of numbers and words. It understands the language of pictures, which is why whenever we see anything graphic or uh, any visuals, like if you watch the news a lot, you start to feel very unsettled. It's because of the visuals that you see. If you were listening to that on the radio and you were not seeing the visuals, it would be disturbing, but not anywhere as near, because it's pictures that really hit the subconscious mind. And similarly, uh, symbols can be used to positively impress on the subconscious mind certain things to make changes. And that's the reason that these symbols, which are there in the work, some of which I will share, um, help us in doing certain things. So that's the reason for symbols. If you saw a lot of ancient languages, they were not written in words; they were written in symbols. The Chinese often say, a picture paints 1,000 words, and it's true. So what can be done with one picture? If you teach a kid A for apple and you show him the apple, bingo, it's there, job done. Same thing with the subconscious mind. So these symbols, just for those who may be curious and interested, uh, are symbols that came to Mrs. Krystal in her meditation. She's spiritually very gifted and evolved. And these symbols came to her in her meditation. And she then started using them to help people. And the results were, of course, phenomenal. And as I said, she was using them more in the West as part of her therapy sessions. And if you read her books, and I'll share the titles of the books, some of them are available on Amazon. At least the first one, I believe, is. So it'll be easy to pick up and read. You'll find it very interesting. So the symbols were of great help. So let's then get into what some of these symbols are that came to her. So one symbol was, of course, the maypole. Now, the maypole it's got nothing to do with the maypole as a concept of, May Day and playing around a maypole. It's just a symbol to help us connect to the higher consciousness. And, the closest that she could find to what it looked like, it was a maypole. So it's just easy to explain it that way. So the maypole is one symbol that you've already experienced, and it's one of the main symbols. The other very important symbol is the symbol of the circle of golden light, right? So this circle of golden light that you see over here is a fundamental part of the practice, and it basically represents your sphere or your energy space or your spiritual space. And this will become a little bit more obvious as we move into the next pillar of the cutting the ties and what it involves. I'll quickly share with you a few other symbols, and we may even get some time to practice a couple.
Yeah, Punjabi, Rajesh, we could not see that symbol.
The circle of golden light?
No, we couldn't see it.
Just give me a second. Let me pull it. You could see the maypole. You can see the maypole though, right? Or maybe the screen sharing has stopped. Give me a second. Where are we? This is the maypole. That one you
this one we could see.
This one you could see, right?
Yeah,
okay, hang on a second. I'll just show you all the others in a second, right over here, right? What have we got? We've got the circle of golden light. Can you see this? Can this be seen? I'm just wondering.
The same maypole is appearing.
Okay, so I have
not yet.
Okay, hang on a second. Here we go. Now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
I think I've solved what I need to do to be able to. So this is the circle of golden light, right? And this is the sort of you call it your energy space or your energy sphere, right? I'll share a few more symbols with you. Just give me a second over here. Let's see what we have over here. Okay, let's just go in no particular order. Can you see this symbol now?
Yes.
Okay, this is called the hourglass. You see the hourglass, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is called the hourglass. The hourglass we use uh, to also, in a way, connect to the higher consciousness. It's a way, if you're doing it alone, this is another way to connect to the higher consciousness. This part over here, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah, that part over here is represents the higher consciousness. Once again, you can imagine any spiritual master, any god, deity over here, if it helps, right? And what this helps you do is just channel your higher consciousness. This actually becomes important in one of the other pillars that we'll talk about, which is surrender, trust, and accept. And we'll come to that in a second. But so this is another symbol. This is just to give you a flavor of the symbols. Uh, you see this one, which is the person working on the wire with two birds.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is called the black and white birds, right? This symbol, and we'll practice this in a bit because it's very simple and a very brief symbol, helps us maintain equanimity. So when we visualize this, uh, it helps us, maintain equanimity. And when we do the symbol, it will become obvious how it does so. This is called the yin and the yang, which is a very famous symbol. And Mrs. Krystal did a lot of work, and because of she was also, I think, a contemporary, or at least she had interacted with Carl Jung, the famous philosopher. And and this is about the masculine and feminine energies, uh, which in the West they would just call it the masculine and feminine energies. Of course, in India we have many different ways of calling it the Shiva Shakti energy. And the fact that each of these energies is represented in all of us. So in every male there is a feminine energy and a masculine energy. Only the masculine energy is dominant, and in every female it's the opposite. And often what tends to happen is that for each of us, sometimes when one energy is too dominant, our decision making, etc., comes from that too much of a head space, less of a heart space, too aggressive, less sensitive. Then you need to balance those energies. And likewise, if in the inverse, those decisions are being made from too much of an emotional space and not enough of a practical space, then there needs to be a balance of these energies. So symbols like this help us maintain the balance. You can see the yin yang symbol, right? Sorry, I forgot to ask before I put it up.
Yes, we could see it. We could see it.
Okay, great. This symbol is called the beach ball, right? The beach ball is something we use for protection. If we feel that that we are under attack verbally, maybe even a little bit physically, you can literally put yourself in this rubber beach ball of multicolors, and you can walk out, right? And you feel a much greater sense of protection. Now, like everything, all these symbols need to be practiced regularly for them to be effective. But they're very effective. These symbols can be used at any point in time. So, let's. I'll give you a simple example. In the time of coronavirus, I have not stopped moving out of the house since March 7th because I don't have a choice. I mean, we have a dog. We walk the dog 3 times a day. I have a father who's in dialysis. We take him to the hospital 3 times a week. In certain situations you're not going to be able to stop doing what you need to do. But for example, this particular symbol has been a great level of comfort. And again, it's an impression on the subconscious mind. um, or you feel that you're going to get into a difficult conversation with somebody where there's always somebody who's attacking you. This is a great call it almost like a force field of sorts, and you just need to literally imagine it as you're having the conversation. It's very practical. You don't have to sit and be in some prayer room or meditation room or doing this. You just start to imagine these things as you're walking around and moving around. um, in fact, Mrs. Krystal shared a very interesting a story around the beach ball, which might be of some interest to all of you. She was in Los Angeles, and she was doing this session with somebody, and a clairvoyant walked into her office and often into her therapy this thing. Often, there would be quite a few who would come by and see her in various things. And somebody else was there in one of her people who was practicing. And the clairvoyant, for the first time, who never knew anything about this work, or so to say, asked the person, why have you got a beach ball around you? Which means that that person could actually see the symbol, because they're trained metaphysically to be able to see aura and symbols, etc. So we thought that was a wonderful example of, I mean, how powerful some of these symbols can be. This is the tree meditation. I'd love to, time permitting, for us to go through this, which is another fundamental meditation. Uh, and this is the maypole, which we all saw. Now this will take us, this particular symbol which I'm pulling up now, will take us to the next pillar. I'm sorry, I'm just going on and on for a bit. I hope to complete the 4 pillars in the next 10 minutes, and I'll open it up for questions, because I'm sure there must be some questions. This is what you can possibly call, one of the most fundamental symbols of the practice, which is the figure 8. Now, the figure 8 is an extension of the circle of golden light, which you saw earlier, right? And this brings us to the next pillar, so to say, which is CCC, which is cutting from controlling circumstances, right? Or much better put, cutting the ties that bind, okay? But cutting from controlling circumstances will give you a few more clues as to what the work is all about. Cutting is simply detaching, right? Um, the word I want to focus on over here is control. Okay, the whole idea behind this practice is to be able to to detach from controlling circumstances, either people or habits, right? So you actually detach. Some people like to call it karmic ties, though she doesn't refer to it in that kind of terminology very often. But you want to be able to cut from any controlling, anything that's controlling you, in a sense, right? So we all carry a lot of baggage from the past, either this birth or even before, for those who believe it. But even it's not important, because let's say this birth itself, everything is accumulated to. I like to explain, as a chartered accountant by profession, by qualification, I always like to say that the closing balance of 31st March is the opening balance of April 1st. So it doesn't matter about past and all, but whatever you're carrying, up to the present, is an accumulation of everything in the past. So everything can be dealt with in the present based on what you're finding to be a controlling situation, or something that's not letting you move forward. The first cuts that we do are with people. And the first people we cut with in the practice is our parents, whether they may be alive or not. We cut with them because we carry a lot of programming from them. They are our first authority figures, so to say. And we pick up a lot of things from them, a lot of them very helpful, a lot of them not so helpful. And the first time I heard about this work, and somebody said, oh, well, we gotta cut the ties with your parents. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I have, 2 very loving parents. I couldn't be in a more loving family. I'm blessed. What are you talking about? And I ignored the work for about 3 years because the time wasn't right, I suppose. And then there's another interesting story how the work just came back and landed, smack center, and made sure that I was very much part of it. But that's another story. But it can be a little misleading, because people say we don't want to cut ties with people we love and all of that. This is not cutting relationships. This is cutting programming. And what it actually does, and I think Sridhar brought it up beautifully on on a briefing call we had last week, is that it actually improves the relationship that you may have. How often do we see, in the case of in the case of parents, like, as much as you may love your mother or your father, sometimes with both or sometimes with one of them, when they're about to speak, you're like, oh my God, here we go again. It's going to be this. It's because, they are programmed a certain way. And if you are not sort of programmed that way, they're sort of trying to put their programming on you. And and it's not natural, but it's what happens. It's actually quite unnatural, but it's what happens to all of us. And therefore, you see examples of, you know, of sometimes in families, and nothing wrong with it. I'm not suggesting for a minute there's anything wrong with it, but you'll see 10 generations of lawyers, 10 generations of doctors, 10 generations of, maybe somewhere down the road, one of those guys was destined to be, the best classical pianist in the world, but it didn't happen because, the programming was so strong. So this is really more about just removing what is not you, so that what's left is then you being your higher consciousness. Then you can to operate from the higher consciousness, which is the next pillar. So subtle control is very subtle, right? Control can be somebody screaming at somebody, which is very obvious control, but it can also be very subtle. Oh, have a little more, I cooked it with so much love. Oh, you didn't enjoy it. Or, I mean, stuff like, I mean, you know what I mean. We've all been through, different versions of it, but control's very, very subtle, and I hadn't realized how subtle it can be, and how much I control people, and I still do. I don't proclaim to be, somebody who's been completely alleviated from it, but I know, thankfully, it's a lot less now, right? Um, and who knows how much more to go. But the fact is that we are controlled and we control all the time, and it's not helpful because you don't like to be controlled, and and even when you're controlling, the energies are all over the place. They're all wrong because you're wanting somebody to toe your line, and you may be missing out on something that is much more that is out there if you just let it flow, right? So the first cuts that we often make are with are not often, I mean, in fact, we've been instructed, and there are not very many instructions, but there are some that need to be followed quite precisely, like learning any craft, right? So the first people we cut with are parents. We also possibly grandparents, if possible, other authority figures who may have had a very, very strong influence on our lives. Sometimes, you were brought up by your grandparents more than your parents, and that also becomes very important to start with. What that does is it clears the air a lot. You start to see very clearly certain patterns changing in yourself, and you also start to identify what are the helpful patterns. And remember, when you're cutting, you don't cut the helpful stuff doesn't get impacted. It's just the stuff that's not very helpful that gets goes away, and the relationships become much better, right? So this is a symbol that's used for that. And this symbol can also be used on a what I like to call a routine maintenance basis, right? Which is, let's say that you're having a difficult conversation with somebody whom you always have a difficult conversation with. The moment, it could be your spouse, it could be it could be your child, it could be your boss, it could be your a colleague, and uh, and okay, exactly where this conversation is going to go. What you end up doing is you end up imagining this figure eight. So let me tell you how it works really quickly. You basically you This is a two-dimensional figure, so just turn this into three-dimensional, if you may. You are the one over here at the bottom, and the person with whom you are doing this exercise is the other dot over here. These dots represent either people or things. And what you do is you imagine yourself in the golden circle, like you saw a little earlier, and you imagine the other person also in a golden circle, but not overlapping, just touching, but not overlapping. And what you do is you run a bright neon strobe light. It's like the Luke Skywalker's light in Star Wars, is the way I like to put it. And you run it, or a light you see in a bar or restaurant. You put it clockwise around the person and anti-clockwise around yourself. And you can't imagine how beautifully this works, because it just helps alleviate control in that instance. So that's how this symbol works. And this is what it looks like in 3-dimensional. I don't know if it's, one sec, let me see how clear it is. When two people are sitting like that, or you could be imagining, even if you're standing or on a chair, it's just that the circles need to be on the floor. Ignore the triangle on top of it, but that's what it looks like in 3D, right? And you're running this circle. This symbol is used for 2 to 3 weeks in the morning, the first time, as soon as you wake up, and the night just before you go to sleep for 2 minutes, continuously before you do a cut, an actual cut with somebody. So again, I'll just repeat, there are 2 uses of this symbol. One is a routine thing, right, where you're just using it in the moment. And then the other thing is to actually do this thing that we call the cut, which is called a cutting ritual. That requires 3 weeks of practice, because anything that has a lot of accumulated programming needs to be deeply imprinted into the subconscious. The subconscious is the most receptive just as you wake up, because you haven't gotten to the conscious state yet, and just as you're about to fall asleep. So just 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening. And at the end of it, there is a certain way to do a cut, which we won't get into today because that's too detailed, but it's just to give you a basis and to ask, to ask further questions. So, so this is cutting from controlling circumstances. People, it can be habits, it can be family patterns around how money was handled in the family, how food is handled in the family, and you keep saying, oh, why is it that I have these eating habits, and they're not healthy? Or why is it that I have these habits around money, that's not healthy? Or why is it that I have these habits around XYZ ABC? Health issues, what have I seen? Did I grow up seeing a lot of my family go through tremendous health issues, and maybe that's gotten stuck to you? So those are the non-people cuts, as we say. And then of course there's the whole routine, this thing. So the okay, good news and bad news, right? The good news is this is greatly effective. Okay, the bad news is for all of us is that that there are 2 circumstances in which you cannot use this symbol to do a cut, and one is with your spouse, right? And the other one is with a child who has not yet attained adolescence or puberty, because they still need a very close association with parents. But the good news is that you can use this as a routine maintenance kind of thing if you're having a debate or an argument. And Mrs. Krystal very beautifully used to tell us, and we used to laugh with her about it, that my husband was an entertainment lawyer. You think I would have gone through all the years of marriage I did with him without doing this with him every day? He doesn't need to know that that it's happening, right? But it's happening because it's happening in your head subconsciously. It's happening. And sometimes I'll joke with my wife when she says, you're terrible, you're so controlling. I tell her, just put me in the figure 8, you'll be sorted here. She's Buddhist, so she doesn't practice any of this, but she's getting warmed up now, because she's realizing it might actually keep me under control here. So, I mean, but you don't do the final cuts with your spouses. It's unless you've separated from someone, then it's or you're divorced. Then it's very recommended actually to do it, because then you're not carrying that anymore and you can move forward. But in circumstances where you're not, the whole idea is that you're on the spiritual journey together, and you're sort of team members and trying to figure it out. So that's what it is. And the greatest gift, she would say, you could give a child who's attained adolescence is to do the cut with that child, because then the child is free to explore and to do things itself, and I'll just I'll take a break and leave it open for questions before we get to the final 2 pillars, and maybe do a meditation so that it doesn't get too monotonous. But a lot of you may have read Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, And we've all read so many beautiful pages that he's written on that. And he talks about marriage in one page, and he talks about children on another page. And I can't tell you how much that resonated when I read that book very late in life, much after I started this work. And I can't tell you how much it resonated with the whole theory of control, and letting things blossom by themselves. So the two pillars we've talked about are simple symbols for the subconscious and cutting from controlling circumstances. We've seen a few symbols, so I would encourage any sort of sharings or questions, at least for a good 10-15 minutes, and then we can do another meditation maybe, and then close with the balance pillars and a few closing questions if there are any at all. Yeah. How much time do we have, Sridhar? Is what I was wondering actually. Yeah.
I think you can go 6:30, 6:45, maximum 7, I would say.
Okay, so let's aim for 6:45 then. I think that's a good, so that it doesn't get too long. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and share questions, ask any questions, to share anything that you'd like to share at this point in time.
Yeah, Rajesh, I just wanted to know whether
Yes.
the actual cutting is a long process, or it's a simple process on after doing this 8, or we just keep on doing the 8.
Yeah, so a very good question, Jagdish. The actual process of cutting, the ritual, so to say, is a very short process. It's about, it's about 20-30 minutes. It's very well laid out in the books. And I'm happy to share more on an individual basis with whomever may want to know more. But that's a very, it takes whatever, 20-30 minutes. So you've done this thing for 3 weeks, let's say, the practicing the figure 8. And when you practice the figure 8 for a cut, you can only be practicing it for one person or one item at a time. So if you're cutting with, say, your mother, you're not practicing the figure 8 for a cut with anybody else. But if you and I are having a scrap and I'm just doing it with you on a routine maintenance basis, that's a different story. But you asked another question in there, which I thought was very important, which is what happens after you do the cut? Do you keep doing the figure 8? It depends. So in the case of Mrs. Krystal particularly, her mum was a very difficult one. She'll forgive me for saying so, but she writes in her own books as well. And very, very controlling on her. And she had to do a cut, but she had to keep doing keep doing the figure 8 even after the cut, because it was a very intense situation, right? And it's true. I mean, I've cut with both my parents. There'll still be times I'm sitting there saying, hey, but I've cut, but why am I getting into this thing? But it's much, it's much, uh, it becomes much less, and you just do it when you need it. Then it sort of turns into a routine maintenance thing. You never cut twice with the same person, because once it's done. You're operating from the higher consciousness, which we'll talk about. So I hope that answers the question, Jagdish. Feel free to please ask any other questions.
You spoke about habits in a family, like health issues or anything like that. So what do we place in the other circle?
Okay, very good question, Neelam, right? If I have your name correctly here. Very good question. So once you do with the people, it's easy. You place a mother, father, authority figure in another circle. For habits or for family conditioning, so to say, there are two methods that we've been shown as to what to place in the other circle. One is that if you've been practicing this method long enough, you may get a very clear sign or a dream or something like that, and you'll just know. You'll say, okay, this is what I'm focusing on, and this is the symbol for that. It absolutely represents that, and I'm clear as day that that's what needs to go in the other circle. If you're not sure, there's a simple method that we follow, which is that we we use our conscious mind to do another activity. So I'm a musician as well. So what I do often is I play the drums to a song so that my conscious mind with the right hand, and I'm right-handed, is constantly doing that. On the left hand, what I'm doing on a sheet of paper is my left hand is just moving unconsciously or subconsciously rather, having put the thought as to what I need to deal with, whether it's a health thing, whether it's whatever it is. So and in about 5 minutes, I'll have this beautiful work of art, which even a 2-year-old will throw in the dustbin. But it's very useful because this work of art that you've done is come from the subconscious state of mind, and so you can either do it with a pen or you can use clay, because clay is very moldable. So you can use a big piece of clay and just be molding something while watching television, making sure that you're not paying attention to what you're molding. The trick is let that come from the subconscious. Whatever is that symbol is the symbol that you cut with, because you've already given a thought that what's important is a clarity with what you want to cut. I want to cut with the effect of the health problems that my family has faced, which may be impacting me. Clear, for example, that's one example. So we tend to say we want to cut from the effect of. Though I would often say that when it's always good to do the people cuts, the parents cuts first, not good, essential in fact, because once that's done, so much clarity comes that what you thought you may need to cut from may not be the case anymore. So it's a very dynamic, investigative almost, and it's sort of very intuitive. It comes to you. It's less mind and it's less mind and more heart. It's just it starts to to come quite naturally to you. And yes, if something is really annoying you, then that that's something that needs to be dealt with, and then we can figure out how exactly to best deal with it. Yeah. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Rajesh.
You feel like another meditation, or any other questions at this point in time? Okay, looks like we'll go into a meditation. Why not? Let's see what I have over here. Can we see the tree clearly over here?
Yes, Raj.
Yes, we can.
That's great. Why don't we do this? Really wonderfully refreshing always. I'm so happy to be able to do it with so many of you, because it just adds so much wonderful energy to it. So again, if you're comfortable, just if you're sitting on a chair or a sofa, your feet on the ground, uncrossed, and your spine straight. And if you're comfortable closing your eyes, we'll just go through what we call the tree meditation. Let's take a moment to center ourselves, just 1 or 2 breaths. Now, just imagine in your mind's eye a tree that you are very familiar with. It could be a tree that's in your neighborhood that you look at very often. It could be a tree that you used to play around in your childhood, a tree that you do a puja to, or if not, just any tree will do, even just an imaginary one. And just imagine that you are slowly walking up to the tree, and you see this beautiful creation of nature, which has got a very strong bark that is deeply rooted into Mother Earth, and at the same time very magnificent and huge sort of branches going into the sky, and in a very magnificent way, reaching towards the sky, and just give the bark of the tree a little tug, just to feel how solid it is. This is a great symbol for stability and security also, which is why we give the tree just a little bit of a shake to feel how solid it is. And once we've done that, just find yourself seated against the tree, even on your chair. Just imagine that's your tree. And just feel gently the bark of the tree on your back. And just push yourself back a little bit and feel how you're so supported and that you have a leaning post and a great sense of leaning and security. Take for a moment and just imagine below your feet the tree below the earth, spreading its many, many roots deep into the earth, grounding it. And take a moment to breathe in the energy from the roots of the tree and let it fill your entire being. So let's take a moment, breathe it in, and once again breathe out any anxiety. What the roots of the tree represent is the Divine Mother. And we'll breathe in, breathe out. As we breathe in, we can also breathe in anything that we think we were missing from our earthly mothers, whether it was love, protection, or any smaller things also. It's not a judgment, it's only because they may have not received it themselves and therefore they were not able to share it with us. But know that from breathing this energy in, you can be absolutely complete. It's Divine Mother energy. So we'll take a few breaths. And now, as you would just imagine yourself being completely filled with this wonderful energy, the Divine Mother, take a moment to turn your attention skyward. Just imagine yourself almost as part of the tree, with your hands extended upwards into the branches and the leaves, which represent the Divine Father. Just imagine yourself breathing the strength of that energy into your being. You can also imagine or ask for anything that you felt was missing from our fathers at the earthly plane. Again, remember, not in any judgment whatsoever. As you feel the strength, just let it percolate in you. Then now take a moment to imagine breathing the energy of the Divine Mother and the Father simultaneously from both the roots and the branches. And just merge yourselves with the simultaneous energy. The Divine Mother and the Divine Father together represent the higher consciousness, which is each of us in a very complete state. Feel any gaps being filled, any doubt of self, anywhere where you judge yourself and feel incomplete. Know that this is unconditional love of the Divine Mother and Divine Father. Accepts you exactly as you are. Each one unique, here on their own spiritual journey. Take a moment to imagine on your left and on your right any kind of nebulous kind of symbols to represent your Divine Mother and your Divine Father. Try not to give them any specific form, just an energy field, and just imagine that you have your hand in theirs and you are continuing to imbibe this unconditional energy that accepts you as you are. Should you have any conversation you wish to have internally with either of them, you can certainly use this time to do so. Now, feeling the warm embrace of their energy, you bid them farewell, knowing that you can call upon them at any time using this meditation. To give you the strength that you have inside. Before we come out, let's also do the black and white bird meditation. Imagine that you're walking on a high wire rope, like a circus act, or between two buildings, and that you have both your arms spread out, one foot in front of the other, keeping perfect balance so that you don't fall off the rope. With your vision straight ahead, a lot of focus, one foot in front of the other. Now, just perceive as you're walking on the rope that as your hands extended out, on your left side comes a black bird, which doesn't look so pleasant and is trying to bother you, and you want to shoo it away, but you don't as you're walking, because if you do that, you lose your balance. So you just ignore it, and it's there. And you let it sit on your extended hand and fly off whenever it wants. Similarly, as you walk a little further, you see a beautiful white bird on your right-hand side, And it's so beautiful that you want to reach out to it and let it sit on you. But again, you don't, because you lose your balance. So you just let it be there. And as you're walking to the other side, you just perceive these black and white birds doing as they please on either side of you with your focus straight ahead and undisturbed. And as you reach the other side successfully, whenever you feel ready, you can just gently open your eyes and come back to the present. So the black and white birds is a great exercise to maintain equanimity, which is so helpful during these times. And the smaller groups that I work with, or the people, we found this very helpful, especially during these very polarized times. Either you're on this side or you're on that side of the fence, and also with so much going on. And this really helps us keep equanimity, which is such an important part of our spiritual progress. Not to be too thrilled about, the pleasant things that happen, and not to be disturbed by the unpleasant things that happened is the only way that we can keep our minds very stable, especially in these very changing times that we live in, which will keep changing, one feels. So hopefully those exercises were a little helpful, and this gives you a little bit of insight into the symbols and how they're used on a regular basis. I'd just like to continue with the other two pillars, which are very essential for the understanding of this work, and then we can close with any final questions. And so we did simple symbols for the subconscious. Um, we did the cutting from controlling circumstances. Now, the other two, one of them is more a useful tip. So the third one would be being from the higher consciousness, surrender, trust, and accept. Or maybe we'll split those into two. Let's talk about the higher consciousness first. So the whole idea is to be able to flow, to have a flow of life, and if I can say, take action or do, not being the doer, but still do, because it's flowing from the higher consciousness, without it coming from the ego self or the small self. Because often we make a lot of, we're thinking, thought, word, and deed. It's coming from so many different places. It's coming from the mind. It's coming from programming. It's coming from various places. So the whole idea of cutting is to clear a lot of that, so that we are able to then operate more freely from the higher consciousness. And operating from the higher consciousness, I like to call it being from the higher consciousness, because it's not so much you being the doer, but more being the instrument and letting things flow from the higher consciousness. And therefore, using techniques like the Maypole, which I will often use.
Rajesh, we can't hear you.
Where did you lose me, Sridhar?
Maybe about 20-30 seconds.
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. So it's thankfully it was Sridhar and he knows a little bit about the work, so hopefully everybody else could hear. But it's about being from the higher consciousness. So the idea is, is once you operate from that space, from your God self, then you're less likely to make mistakes, because it's happening from a space of a pure collective good. Now, people often ask the question, how do I know that something is happening from the higher consciousness, right? And it takes practice. So, you start by using these symbols or by any other method of tuning into the higher consciousness. This is by no means the only method, but it's a very effective one. And it's what we're talking about today. And then you slowly start to get into the habit of recognizing. Also, in this method, what we can do is we can ask for a sign to know whether things are flowing from the higher consciousness or not. Mrs. Krystal used to have a sign where she used to pray to ask for a sign, and often enough, she would, with practice, she got a sign, she would get a shivering or a tingling a sensation down her neck, and she knew, okay, that's it. It's the higher consciousness. So it can even be as black and white as that, but for the most part, you tend to know because the higher, when you're operating from there, it's for the collective good of all. It's selfless, and you don't feel the negative emotions of fear, of should I say, not wanting to share. It's a very open feeling. There's no hoarding. There is no what's the word I'm looking for, that sort of that feeling of constriction. It's a feeling of expansiveness. So then sort of you get the sense that it's flowing from there. So sometimes one doesn't know how to tune into the higher consciousness. These tools are very helpful in doing so. So just tuning into the Maypole, uh, even if it's just for 5 seconds, you don't have to do the entire Maypole exercise. Helps you get tuned into the higher consciousness and be able to move from there. And then that allows you to be very, very free, what we call miracles start to happen then, because you start to see things that come your way that you may have not earlier, because you were following a pattern, or you were following a group, or you were being told what to do, and you were doing exactly that without more from fear rather than from it making sense for a collective good. So it's very helpful, and the in fact, one of the main things is that we do everything in this work from the higher consciousness, by connecting to the higher consciousness, and then it becomes a habit, and it just happens almost instantaneously as you're walking around and doing things. The other part of it is to surrender, trust, and accept to the higher consciousness. What tends to happen is that often we want things exactly the way we want them. It's it's the famous God, I believe in you as long as my son gets this marks in his exams, and I get that job, and I get this, and it just goes on and on and on. It's so conditional. And I'm not saying that we on this group, but I'm just talking about in general. And often we pray for something very, very exact. We say that, listen, give us guidance, make us get this. But just imagine that you are wishing for something, but there is an element of, not element, but there is a complete surrender, trust, and accept policy going on. Then you worked hard to get a particular job, and you did everything, and all the interviews you did, and absolutely great. It was promised to you, and it didn't happen, right? Now you are operating from the high C all along, and all of that, and it's disappointing. But the truth of the matter is that uh, uh, if you're surrendered, trusted, and accepted, maybe there's something much more amazing coming your way, right? Or maybe not, right? Because we all have to go through what we have to go through. But the moment there is that surrender, life flows. It flows much, much better because you just get on with the next thing that you need to do. And, you're not attached to it. It's like how children take all this beautiful effort to build these fantastic sand castles on the beach. And when the parents say, it's time to go home, they get the most joy out of just kicking it and letting it all just come down in pieces in the water, taking it, and it's completely gone. And you're sitting there for a second thinking, "Ki yaar, kitne mehnat se banaya hai." He really did such a wonderful job. And, it's unattached, this thing. I'm not saying all kids are like that. They're attached to many things, but I'm just using it as a metaphor. That, the surrender, trust, and accept part of it becomes very important because often, a lot of techniques tell us that if you do this, you'll get what you want, and I think it's kind of approaching it sometimes from the wrong, or it's not, I wouldn't say it's wrong. It's not right to call anything right or wrong. It's all different experiences, but I think people get disappointed then, and it's not about having fewer expectations and then therefore having no expectations and then getting disappointed. It's not that. It's about the flow. It's about, being able to surrender, trust, and accept that whatever therefore comes, once you've surrendered to it, whatever comes, you accept it. And then, the next thing happens and the next thing happens. And it's brilliant. There's a wonderful book called The Surrender Experiment, which I read not too long back. It's I'll post it to Sridhar and maybe he can share it with all of you on the group. It was a beautiful story of how this man in the US, in Miami or in Florida, in that area, continued to surrender. And he was one of the biggest. He became one of the biggest sort of people in the medical outsourcing. WebMD and all was a company that bought his company over, and also wonderful experience. And again, that resonated so much with the work that we do over here, which is surrender, trust, and accept. And both of those, flowing from the higher consciousness and surrender, trust, and accept, also tie in beautifully to what we learn in the Bhagavad Gita about not being the doer, being the instrument, which allows you to operate from the higher consciousness. You're not then taking on that karma, and then not the fruits of your labor are not yours. They're not for you to decide. And that's the whole surrender, trust, and accept. So the dots connect very beautifully with what all the great avatars and spiritual masters have said, whomever they may be. And these tools and symbols help us do it. That's all. They're just another stepping stone to help us get there. And then the last thing I'll talk about very briefly is not so much a pillar, but it's a practice with the accurate methodology. So like any craft or anything, the deeper one goes, the more the results will be. So this is not by any means to say that anybody should particularly do this craft, but if it does resonate, if it is giving results, then the deeper one goes and the more one continues. If you dig anywhere, sometimes you'll hit water, so or you'll get, it starts to to reveal itself in beautiful ways. So I think that's an important part of it. I think practicing is really important, and also keeping it very accurate to the technique itself, because if you go on the web, there's many references to cutting the ties that bind, which is maybe perhaps why Mrs. Krystal talked about her method as the Phyllis Krystal method, because this was given to her. This was something that was given to her by the high sea. No one particular person came and gave it to her. Though many years later, when she met Satya Sai Baba, who then was her guru only in her 50s, did he ask her about the work that she started in her 40s, saying, how's the work going? Yes, it's perfect. It's going along very well. It's all me. It's all coming God, which was it was just a corroboration for her, but a very important one, that too. But this work came to her. So, before she left the physical plane, she made it very clear that, you don't have to do the work, but if you're doing the work, do it accurately, because there are certain things about it that will then work, whereas one has found often sometimes a lot of and every time there's a practitioner taking the work, it may sound a little different, but the core will always be the same. But sometimes there's a lot of fusion that goes on, and what that tends to do is that it removes it takes away from the efficacy of the work that is being fused and this work as well, because then neither is being done with the integrity of that particular work. So if there's anyone who would like to learn more about this work, I'm available. I'm sure Sridhar can make my number known. I'd be happy to share whatever I have picked up from Mrs. Krystal and through my own practice and journey as well. Ultimately, this is a journey of the self to the self. So once you practice it and you get the hang of it, you can be flying on your own till such time you want some insight or something like that. It's very much a self healing and self-help technique. They're very simple symbols, and you don't, once you read the book and have a few clarifications sorted out and get the premise, then working with a partner is more as a facilitator or a guide, but it's by no means a requirement. So I hope if you choose to do it, you have some fun with the work, and I'll just leave it open for any last questions, and then we can close. Keeping to my promise of 6:45.
Fantastic, Rajesh. But I will also check with the group is there are some bunch of people who want to come together. Maybe we can set up a separate group outside with the smaller group who are maybe interested in exploring this further.
Oh, absolutely.
That's okay. Then we can have a separate smaller group set up.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
add that to some of the other people who are also practicing with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very available to do that and to share whatever we can. So just before we close, if I could just request everybody to once again imagine the Maypole in our midst.
There are some questions.
Yes, please.
No, there are some. They're asking for the names of Mrs. Krystal's book, which you had suggested, Rajesh.
Mrs. Krystal wrote a number of books, but for the Cutting the Ties work, she has a series of 4 books. The first book is called Cutting the Ties That Bind, Growing Up and Moving On. That is the first in the series, and that is the one that should be read first. There is also a workbook like this, which has all the symbols in it, and all the symbols are explained very simply, with an instruction of how to sort of undertake each symbol. So I would recommend the Cutting the Ties, the first book, and also this workbook, which is sometimes not very easily available, but it may be there on Amazon. If it's not, please get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to share whatever I can within the this thing of copyrights and all the rest of it. But we'll figure out a way to be able to impart the work and the symbols. The second book is Cutting More Ties That Bind. The third book is Cutting the Ties of Karma. And there's a fourth book called, I think it's The Journey of the Phoenix, some title like that. I can't remember the exact title. It's a very thin book that's there on Google Play. But that's really the final sort of almost like a summary of everything. The 3 essential books are Cutting the Ties That Bind Us, Cutting More Ties, and then Cutting the Ties of Karma. Are the 3 books here.
One of the questions which has come in the chat, Rajesh, is can we practice the symbol 8 with one who's no more in the world?
Yes. Yes.
Can you please explain how and why would you want to do that?
You may want, see, that very good question. So, and I was just about to come to that because it's why would you want to do that? Now, two things, right? You probably heard the expression of, oh my God, he controls me from the grave. Now, that would happen probably with parents, right? Because that's been an accumulated pattern thing that's going on for many, many lifetimes. So with the parents, where you're meant to cut, right? You should and can absolutely cut even when they're no longer on this physical plane. It will because it's about freeing things metaphysically. You free them and you free yourself wherever they are. So that's why you would want to cut from parents. But you're right, in other circumstances, if somebody was bothering you on a small basis and is no longer there and is not really a feature, you may, I mean, there may be no need to do so. But with parents, definitely. And if there's anything that's controlling you, the short answer is that if it's still controlling you, you can cut from it. So that's the short answer.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So you spoke about doing this very accurately, right? So how do you know that you're doing it correctly? Is there any indication?
Okay. Let me take a step back from that. When I meant doing it accurately, perhaps that was not the best use of words. What I meant to say was doing it in its own space. So let's say somebody practices some other kind of meditation, which may be very effective, in all probability is very effective in its own this thing, but fuses the meditation with this meditation. That's not such a good idea, because this is self-contained. So when I meant practice it, I mean practice it with its own integrity more than accurately. It's never going to be 100% prescribed because it comes from the higher consciousness. For example, if you ask me how much did I prepare for today's session, it was minimal, because the higher consciousness doesn't allow me to do so, because it's like, why do you need to prepare so much? See where you go at that time, as long as you've been doing the work. Or you'll find many people who give spiritual sharings where they don't, I mean, Mrs. Krystal would get into a place of 200 people saying, I have no idea what I'm going to tell you next. And it wasn't to be cool or anything. It was just to explain that it's coming and flowing rather than being too prescribed or too pre-planned. So I didn't mean accurate in that sense. I just meant to keep the integrity of the work as a self-contained this thing while you're practicing it. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay. But irrespective of that, is there any indication that would let you know that you're doing this correctly? Like, for example, the tree meditation that we did right now. How do I know that I did it as we?
I mean, as long as you were just letting go and doing what it did for you, there's no right or wrong beyond that. And every time it may be a little different. If somebody else was guiding the tree meditation, something else may have come to that person. I can't remember half of what I said during the tree meditation, I'll be quite honest with you, because whatever came was said. But the general thesis and the concept will always be similar. The workbooks and the have a very specific step-by-step instruction where you can't go wrong, right? In a sense, right? And then it's really what you're feeling internally. So I don't think you need to be too tough on yourself about, did that go okay, kind of thing. Just be free.
And can you use this figure eight as a protection against an attack from another person, like a beach ball, and like or to accept a certain circumstance?
Yeah, sorry, you can use it as a protection, as in if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody or wherever there's control, right? So yeah, you absolutely can. That's another one of its usage. But I didn't catch the second part of your question. Sorry.
Yeah, to accept a certain circumstance, that when things didn't go as you wanted it to be, can you put that situation in the other circle and use it?
I'm trying to figure out an example of where that might work. Is there an example you
Yeah,
can share, which is not?
say for example, the job that you are doing right now, and you are not very satisfied with it, but nevertheless you still have to do it. So
Sorry, that was a very obvious example. I should have picked up on that. Yeah. Uh, Well, what you can, what it's really meant for, right? The figure eight
there is
is
always
it's
a
meant.
dilemma between what you want to do and what you should do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think there's where the surrender, trust, and accept becomes very distinct. But often the job is not pleasurable because of a person, right? It may be a group of people.
mm,
It may be a boss. It may be somebody who's this thing, and perhaps often enough, what tends to happen is that it helps you. It's helpful to do the figure eight with the person, where there's a consistent issue, right?
mm,
I'll tell you, like, for example, if you're in a job and you know that you have to be in a job, it doesn't help to cut from where you're not doing a cut. Here you're just putting it on the other side.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, it's not it's something we can think about, right? I wouldn't say it's something you can't do, right? Just so that the job doesn't control you. It's possible, but
oh,
the figure eight is generally more used for people and for habits and for patterns, right?
oh,
But yes, absolutely. If there is a situation and you want to give that situation a symbol, so that it doesn't control you, you can absolutely put it in the figure eight. Let's say you give your current job and the whole aura around that thing a situation or a this thing, and you put it in a figure eight and keep doing it. It may alleviate some control, but remember that the answers may always be deeper than that. um, it may be that that's very sort of touching the surface, but it the answer may be deeper. So it's important while you do that to also dig deeper and see where the root of the problem is and cut there.
yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Rajesh, I'm getting a lot of requests for the images. If we can share it, if you can share me with some of the images, I can
Yes.
put the photos of the images for people who may want to look at the images.
Yes. Just give me a little bit,
No problem.
Sridhar. I'm trying to figure out. There's some copyright issues over here that I don't want to be in
No
in this
problem.
thing
As
off.
long
But I think
whatever you can share or
yeah,
wherever you think you can find in Google, if you can send us the link,
exactly. That's exactly what
I can share the link of Google what you need to
That's
search.
exactly what I'll do is I'll get it off the web and I'll share those links with
No
people.
problem. No
Yeah.
problem.
Wonderful.
Can you please just clarify about the I'm Hemanti, yeah?
Hi, Hemanti.
Just wanted to clarify you explained about the clockwise and the anti-clockwise usage of that symbol 8. Can you
Yes.
just explain
Sure.
it again as to how to
Sure.
use it?
Sure. That's an important this thing. Can you see the? Sorry, I've got it wrong. The wrong image up here. Wrong image again. Let's see if I can find it. Am I still sharing the screen? I can't.
Not yet.
I'm not yet. I'm not yet. Here we are. Sorry. This is a Maypole. Just trying to share the screen here.
You're seeing the tree, Rajesh.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to pull up the figure 8. It's the Maypole. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, here we are. Can we see the figure 8?
Yes.
Okay. So this, I'm just going to put my cursor. This would be you, right? This is always you, right? This circle over here. Can that be seen clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
This is always the situation or the person or the symbol. It's always a symbol. So it's either a person or a symbol. Now you have to find a symbol. So in the particular case the gentleman asked about, in fact in the last case for the job, you'll have to create a symbol for that, right? Which we talked about a little earlier, and I can share with you in private as well, only because of time restriction. So it's always a symbol, and this is you, and this is the clockwise, right? So this is in 2D. in 3D, it looks something like this. Can that be seen somewhat? When there's like two people sitting across one another?
Yeah.
Right? So you imagine it, and it doesn't have to be that, they're sitting cross-legged. It can be standing, it can be on a chair. But it's effectively what you do is you turn the blue light clockwise around the person or situation or symbol, and you go anti-clockwise around yourself. And you do this, all of these symbols, if you do them just for 2 minutes also, that's good. And literally once it becomes a habit, if I'm talking to somebody and I know where this is going, and it's just, not going good for either of us, the symbol is working. They may be at the other side of the planet, but the symbol is going on in my mind's eye, right? And
so no affirmations along with it, right? No affirmations no saying.
No, not required, because the symbols themselves really help the subconscious mind more than anything else. So they're in themselves very effective.
Great, Rajesh. That is a good explanation.
Yeah.
Jagdish, you want to say something?
Thank you.
Yes, I think let me say really a very big thanks to Rajesh. I mean, it was a beautiful, very beautiful session and so smooth. It was just flowing like nectar. Like every word that you're saying, and so soft. I know it was not unhurried. It was not it went in a very beautiful manner. And I like the 2-3 things that you mentioned about the 3 S's, which is very, very, very simple symbols for the subconscious. That it always will stay back with me. And the concept about your trust, surrender, and acceptance. And finally, the 3 C's, which you mentioned about cutting, controlling, so which is very, very, very important. And the way you explained this whole concept and with the meditation, actually it is staying with us lifelong. So I'm very happy that, Sridhar has asked you, whether we can have a little smaller group also who would be interested in actually going through that full session in which you can train us about the actual cutting and all. It will be really fantastic for us to actually practice those, whatever you have been telling us. And I'm sure there will be a lot more symbols which are powerful. When I really liked the symbols that you shared with us, the beach ball or the hourglass or the maypole, actually each one of them was so energizing and different and yet so simple. So it is going to stay with me for a long time. So I would like to, behalf of all the Lost Key group members, I would like to thank you once again. And I like to thank all the other guests also who have joined in, like Abshin and, Gracie ma'am, Neelam Mani ma'am. So all those who have joined us for the first time today, I really want to say a big thank you to you. And I really appreciate Rajesh ji for your time and effort that you have taken and connected us to the higher conscious, the higher C. I think that is what you have done so simply and so nicely. And I cannot express it in words. So you can, it's completely out of gratitude that I'm saying this to you.
And our collective
thank you so much
thanks to the higher consciousness that has taken us through this session so smoothly. So
yes,
it's all thanks to the
absolutely.
higher consciousness. Thank you.
Rajesh, Naushad, I'd like to say thank you to you, but I am very delighted to see the new avatar of my friend Swami Jagdishanand. Jagdishanand, if you can speak, and come on screen, there's a halo around you and actually makes you look like a Swamiji. So I hope this is your new enlightenment in the last 5-6 months of, the Corona yug.
I don't know. It just happened. This came up and I said, "Wow, it's just me." It was like I was felt very comfortable with it.
Fantastic. Keep it up. This suits your persona.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
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 Thank you. Thank you.